Good morning. Today is May 9th, 2023. Time is 8:35 a.m. The Committee on Parole is called to order. The panel today will be Ms. Bonnie Jackson and Mr. Pete Freeman, and I am Alvin Roche. With the Committee on Parole is seated at DOC headquarters in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. With the staff at DOC, please introduce yourself.
Carla Williams.
Francis Abbott.
Thank you, staff. Our first remote location this morning is the Louisiana State Police Barracks. With the staff at the barracks, please introduce yourself.
Lieutenant Jeremy Burns, Executive Officer.
Captain Patrick Washington, Commander.
Lisa Prejean, classification.
Thank you, barracks. We are ready for our first case. Would the offender please introduce yourself and give your DOC ID?
My name is Jared Francis. My number is 86386.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Mr. Francis, I think you are familiar with the process already. I think this is hearing number 6 for you. Is that correct?
5, sir. I think 5.
Is it hearing number 5? Okay. But I will explain the process for those of you here for the first time. I will read some information into the record. Once that information is in the record, we'll conduct a parole interview with Mr. Francis. At the appropriate time, we'll give Captain Washington and Lieutenant Burns a chance to make comments if they wish. And then we'll give the opposition a chance to make statements, and then we will give the supporters a chance to make statements. We have legal counsel present from Mr. Francis. Would legal counsel please introduce yourself?
Good morning, Jane Hogan on behalf of Jerry Francis. I'll make a statement at the end with the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Also in attendance today in opposition, we have Chad Chaffee, Nick Chaffee, Brenda Johnson, Wilford Johnson, Stacy Chafford, Jeannie Chafford, and representing the Louisiana Attorney General's office, Mr. Attorney Joseph LeBeau.
Joseph LeBeau, yes, sir.
Okay. Also representing the 16th JDC District Attorney's Office, Ms. W. Claire Howard. And she would like to make a statement.
Sir.
And Ms. LeBeau, you would like to make a statement also?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the appropriate time, we'll give you a chance to do that. In support of Mr. Francis, we have his attorney, Ms. Jane Hogan, Ms. Karen Myers, Louisiana Parole Project, Dr. Kevin Mark, a cousin, and Mr. Norris Henderson, representing the first 72 and vote. And we will give Mr. Myers, Dr. Mark, and Mr. Henderson a chance to make a statement at the appropriate time. Do you understand the process, Mr. Francis?
Yes, sir, I do, sir.
I'm going to read some information and then we'll conduct the interview. Mr. Francis is a first felony offender. His offense is armed robbery in Acadia Parish. He was sentenced on October 24th, 2016. And he, at that time, he was resentenced. His original sentence was back in 1976, 9 years, but Acadia Parish resentenced him in 2016 to a term of 50 years. He was sentenced on November 10th, 1976 in St. Martin Parish for armed robbery, and he received a 99-year sentence. The 50-year sentence that he received at resentencing ran concurrently to the 99-year sentence in St. Martin. His total sentence is 99 years. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
His parole date was October 12th, 2003. His adjusted good time date is December 6th, 2029, and his full term date is June 14th, 2075. Is all this information correct, Mr. Francis?
Yes, sir, it is, sir.
Your case has been assigned to Mr. Freeman. Would you please answer Mr. Freeman's questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Francis, how old are you?
I'm 64 years old, sir.
Okay. And how long have you served on this charge?
I served 46 years, 11 months, and 9 days, sir.
Okay. What's your educational level?
GED, sir.
Okay. Was this your first felony conviction?
Yes, sir, it was.
Did you get your GED while you was in prison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Francis, just try to walk me through those robberies. Tell me what was going on in your mind, what was going on in your life at that time?
Well, sir, at the time I was going through transformation with identity crisis. Didn't really understand who I was, but I make no excuse for that. I take full responsibility for everything that I did. I don't blame nobody or nothing for my circumstances. I take that responsibility for all the misconducts that I did, all the tragedies that I caused, all the pain that I caused victims and my victim family. I take full responsibility for that, sir.
Okay, well, tell me exactly what did you do?
Well, sir, in St. Martin Parish Bank, I was responsible for shooting the show. I shot in the show, sir. And I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have did that, and I know that that was wrong. I accept full responsibility for that, sir. I have no qualms about that. In the Crowley robbery, though I wasn't a shooter in that, I take responsibility because I was there and shouldn't have been there. I take full responsibility for all the hurt and pain, all the tragedy that people are still going through from the trauma that I caused. That is my responsibility. I did that.
Okay, your co-defendant was 26 years old, you were 17. How did y'all know each other?
Well, I stayed in a housing project in which was called, I don't recall the name of it. I was standing, and he had got out of prison, and some kind of way we got to know each other, not really know each other, but it hadn't been like, well, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks. And that's how we got together during that time. Yes.
Okay. Why commit the robbery? Were you on drugs? Were you on alcohol?
No, sir, I'm not gonna blame nothing for committing that robbery. I committed that robbery. I would say it had to be out of greed, misunderstanding, being confused, wanting to be accepted, and I allowed that to mislead me to do what I did, and I shouldn't have did that.
Yeah, you come out with $30 from one of the robberies. I'm not sure how much you came out with from the bank, but taking people's lives for that little bit of money. I was just wondering what was going on in your life at that time. You look at the community officials, and I'm gonna read it because it's a bunch. The judge is opposed. David Smith, the assistant district attorney, Elliot Cassidy, is opposed. The sheriff, K.P. Gibson of Acadian Parish, is opposed. Chief Stelly Rain is opposed. There was no comment from the judge in the 16th ADC. Opposed is Mr. Dewey, DA, in St. Martin. Opposed is Sheriff Beckett Bro, St. Martin Parish, and Chief of Police Ronald Salori. Your family is unopposed, Mr. Norris Henderson. And he wrote some stuff. We've gotten tons of letters. Quite obviously, there is a lot of opposition to you getting out. I mean, this was, major crimes, which affected a lot of people. How do you think you affected the families of these individuals that you shot? The one that shot and when you were there, which is the same thing.
Well, sir, I think that the impact that I've had on this family, I know that there's nothing that I could ever do to change that. But I would like them to know that I am very, very remorseful for all the pain and all the drama that I've caused them in this time. And I know it continued, and I know that it hurt, as well as the society that I came out, and especially the family. I know that they're going through a lot. I know, and I am the cause of that. I'm responsible for that. That is why I continue to strive to be the person that I am today, because I know that I can't make up for what I did. I know that I can't change what I did, but I can actually change who I am. And I have demonstrated that for the last 40 plus years, that I am not that person. I'm not that immature juvenile that committed the crime that I committed. I'm not that person, sir.
Okay, let me ask you this. You've taken quite a few classes. What classes have you learned the most from? Give me a couple of them that have affected you the most.
Well, first and foremost, I think that the hospice program is something that affected me so tremendously and changed my life forever, because it taught me the true essence of compassion. It taught me how to be responsible for caring for others. It taught me about life itself in general. It taught me that to have love and to be able to express that love, be able to interact with people and care for people, and care at the same time. I got more out of it than I gave to it. You know, it was really tremendous and a blessing to be a part of that particular program within itself. And another was dealing with the Park Lookout Committee, was being able to bury people in dignity. That helped me tremendously too, to grow, to know that all of those things take place in society, and that though my society was inside here, that I was still a part of a society, and I wanted to be able to be a contributor to that society as much as I could possibly be.
Okay, you know, the hospice program is a great thing. I mean, it is a very, I would say probably one of the hardest things to do in prison is hospice, dealing with the ill and the sick and helping them out every day. So we thank you for that. But what exact class did you learn the most out of? Not program like the hospice or Point Lookout. What class, like anger management, victim awareness, or
Yes,
change?
sir.
Which
Well,
class affected you the most?
The class that affected me the most as far as class and education was victim awareness, because I got to really see exactly what I put victims through. I got to be able to understand that sometimes people are never going to be able to forgive. And I understand that, and I empathize with those people in that particular area, because I know that I hurt them. And I know that it's not easy for them to forgive, and especially when you consider how tragic my crime was. I understand that. And I understand to be able to relate to them and understand the position that they take, and not be upset and not be angry. Just, I have to accept it for what it is.
You had 132 write-ups, which is bad, but you've been in there 47 years, and I think your last write-up was 2012.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was that last write-up about?
Well, I was at the administration building in the main prison, and I left to go to the hospital and didn't check out. I didn't check out with the proper. I didn't go through the proper procedures of checking out, but I left with the same person that I came with. So it was like I wasn't there, but I take responsibility for that too. I didn't check out. I was going to take care of patients. My mind was on the patient, and I didn't go through the proper procedures with that.
What is going to be your transition plan? We were to grant your release today.
Well, sir, I plan to go to the Parole project on a kind of like a long-term basis to reiterate back into society and have that transition process professionally. And as well as that, I have an extended plan to go to New Orleans area for the first 72 for continuous process.
All right. Warden, do you have any comments? How long has he been there? How's he behaved?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Jerry's been with us for a little over 8 months. And if I could use 2 words to describe him, one would be consistent, the other would be humble. Mr. Jerry gets up every day, consistently goes to work with no complaints. And before this hearing today, I already got a call saying, what are we going to do without Mr. Jerry? Because his work environment and the people that he worked with truly do appreciate the hard work that he does for them. The other thing I would say is humble. Every day you see Mr. Jerry, he's got a smile on his face and encouraging, always willing to help somebody. I don't know about his crime. All I can say is the man that I see sitting next to me. And he made a true impact on not only me, but everybody in this facility. So
What is his job at the facility?
He works at our staff development center. It's kind of like our hotel for when people come in from out of the area to train and do in-service. He's their office orderly and he cleans up and he helps with the anything really they have. He comes sometimes helps them in the kitchen, sometimes helps them clean the hotel. So he has kind of a mini hat kind of job.
Mr. Chapman, that's all the questions.
Okay, let me clear the record. Mr. Francis, in mention the two armed robberies, let me clear the record. The first armed robbery was in Acadia Parish in the town of Rhine, Louisiana. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You said Crowley, but it was Rhine, Louisiana, right?
Yes, sir. Rand. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the second armed robbery was in St. Martin Parish at the St. Martin Trust Bank, and it was in Hawks, Louisiana. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mrs. Jackson.
Good morning, Ms. Francis. I just have a couple of questions. You know, as I read your file, I was interested in how it was that a 17-year-old and a 26-year-old were involved in the commission of this crime. So, you kind of, I know that you accept responsibility, and that was basically your response, but I'm interested in how does a 17-year-old and a 26-year-old become partners in crime?
Well, ma'am, I really don't like, being honest, I don't like to place my
I'm
responsibility.
not asking you to do
All
that.
right.
I'm asking you, how did you and Mr. DeMarche become partners in crime?
Well, because I looked up to him and I was led in the wrong direction with him, something that I had never did before. And that's why I always say, when I said that I don't put no responsibility on nobody else, but that was actually what happened. But I still take responsibility for it because I should.
I'm not saying you're not accepting responsibility. I'm just, usually you don't have a 17-year-old and a 26-year-old hanging out together. Okay? It's almost a 10-year age difference. So what was your family situation?
Well, my family situation at the time, we were very
How
private.
many, did you have both parents?
No, ma'am, I was in a single household parent.
How many kids did you have? How many siblings?
I had, at that time, I had 10 siblings.
10?
Yes, ma'am.
Were they in the same household?
Yes, ma'am.
And how was it? How many bedrooms in the project apartment?
We had 4.
And so you had 11 people living in your house. Where did you fall in age? Were you the oldest, the youngest, somewhere in the middle?
I was the second to the oldest.
Okay. And how were you in school when you were 17?
No, ma'am. I got out of school when I was in the 3rd grade, and how I got there, I used to be going around and do little hustling, like cutting grass and stuff like that, to make ends meet, to try to help my mother out with things, basically. It was,
How do you stop going to school in the 3rd grade?
I just wasn't going. Wasn't going, man.
And so how many brothers do you have?
I have 3 young brothers. 3.
Did you have an older brother?
No, ma'am.
So you were the oldest of the brothers, if you will.
It's-
And did you know Mr. Demochet before he went to prison? Did you know anything about him?
Well, ma'am, I didn't know him. I didn't know him until he got out of prison.
Well, what was it about him that made you look up to him?
Looking back on it, I just really wanted to be accepted. I mean, and he was like the guy on the block, the new guy, and I just kind of like clinged to him and I just accepted the leadership from him that wasn't conducive to life itself, period, because I actually, not only did I ruin people's lives from my affiliation with him, I also ruined my life.
Well, let's talk about the hospice program. How long have you been involved with hospice?
I actually been involved from the onset of hospice for 24 years. There's a typo error in the paper that says 34, but it's 24 years, a little over 24 years.
And what exactly was your role with hospice?
My role was actually to take care of patients, to
Does that
assist,
involve?
assist them in bathing, assist them spiritually, assist them in writing letters, being there for them when they needed someone to talk to, being there for them when they take their last breath, because in most times when people are going out, they really just want something to hold on to, someone to be there for them. And it'd be hard, but becomes easy because you know that what you're doing is genuine and sincere and is loving and is compassionate, and you get more out of it than you put in it. I benefited from that program tremendously, and that's why I went all out to give my services to it.
And the Point Lookout Project, how long were you involved with that?
We actually, and this was created around the same, or maybe a little bit before, where we actually started varying, because at one point we used to just dig a hole and put people in without having services. But we went to seeing that wasn't actually humane, just to just throw somebody in a hole just because they're in prison, or whatever. So we started campaigning to get something better for people at their last place to be placed, where their families could come to funerals and see a dignitary person, dignitary funeral, and that was the drive to do that.
And do you have any surviving family members?
Yes, ma'am. I have all my siblings are still alive, and I have my Aunt Geraldine, and I have my cousin Kevin, which is here today, which is her son. I've been having real strong family support. I don't have no problems about my family support. They've been supporting me.
Well, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Francis, we've talked about the hospice program, and we've talked about Point Lookout. So let's talk about the Human Resources Club. What's your role and what's your involvement with the Human Resource Club?
Well, the Human Resource Club was actually an organization that reached out to people that was in need, in and out. It was an inside organization as well as an outside organization, and we try to help people with spiritual, physical, social, economics, and it goes on. Whatever help what we could show to someone that was in need of crisis, whether it be someone to help counsel or someone to that needed a meal to eat, whatever it is, that's what we did.
Where did you get the financial resources to offer this help to people in need?
Well, we had several lucrative programs in place. We organized concessions that we actually sold stuff that we were able to finance some of the programs. We would have fundraisers that we would deal with to raise funds to take care of different things like that.
I also see that you officiated sporting events at Louisiana State Penitentiary. Tell us about the volleyball and the boxing association.
Well, yes, sir. That was like an outreach program to try to contact with the younger prisoners that was coming in prison. And that way to get them started with things that would be more progressive as far as for their growth and development in prison instead of going the other way. And that was the purpose of us dealing with the Angola Amateur Boxers, Hospice Association, the Soccer Association, football. We went around with the sports issue.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions? At this time, we're going to hear from the supporters. Mr. Kerry Myers from the Louisiana Parole Project.
Good morning. Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. Mr. Francis has been a client of ours for quite some time. We recognize the things that he's done during his 46 years of incarceration. I know him personally, and I've watched this man live his life inside the institution with integrity. I've seen him involved, become a charter member of hospice as someone who coordinated Point Lookout for more than 12 years. He was one of the most loyal and dedicated volunteers every time we needed him with Point Lookout. His other programs, obviously, he's done the hard work with victim awareness and thinking for a change in anger management and substance abuse. He's given to his faith community. He was 17 years old at the time of his crimes. Obviously, a child with no direction, no role models, looking for acceptance and approval from someone, which he found in someone 10 years older than him. No excuses, as he said, but he was certainly at 17 susceptible to those influences, and he committed some horrible crimes. But it's been 46 years, and he's done hard work. He's done excellent work, and he's lived with integrity. We are happy to provide long-term support for Mr. Francis while he gets his life back together. Again, from 17 to now 64 years old, the transition is going to be significant. But since his last hearing, he's continued to do the same things. He never let the denial of the last hearing deter him or derail him. He went from Angola to the state police barracks. He's continued to do all the things that he needs to do to be the person that he is today. I mean, we just ask that you grant his parole today. Parole Project is here to give him all the support needed in his transition. And I know you're going to hear from Mr. Henderson about even additional support. So we would just ask that today is the day that Mr. Francis gets his second chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Let's hear from, 1 second, Dr. Kevin Marks, his cousin.
Yes, good morning. And thank you for allowing me to be here to support Jerry's parole request. In 1976, I was 8 years old, and Jerry was my eldermost cousin, who at that point, I really didn't know all that well. But I remember vividly that, in studying what was going on among the other family members, the adults, that he had done something real bad. And it left me with this impression of him that I held on to for many years. About 17 years ago, Jerry and I reacquainted while he was at Angola. And we have maintained a very strong and developed a strong relationship over those 17 years. I've gotten to know him. And after the first year or so and talking to him very regularly, I realized that this is not the guy who developed or who did these crimes back in the 70s. What I have learned about Jerry over the years is that, I mean, he is such a resilient guy. He is filled with compassion. As a physician, I can tell you, one of the hardest things I have to do is have a discussion with the family about cancer or take care of a patient at the end of their lives. And Jerry did that and does that through the hospice program. And that speaks a lot to his character. He is very sensitive to the needs of others. He's always, inquiring about other family members and their struggles. And he is a very wise guy, very filled with wisdom. And I often ask myself, I'm like, wow, how could he have developed so much wisdom living in that confined, secluded environment at Angola? But he is very well read, he studies, and he is very mature. He's a very hard worker. He really enjoys doing things to put smiles on people's faces, and he does not ever want to do anything to sadden anyone. As a representative of his family, we are a very blessed and large family, and we are a faith-based family, and Jerry clings on to his faith. We will offer full support to him if granted his release, and full support in every aspect. We want to see him be successful. We want to be able to get to know him in the mainstream. We want to be able to let our kids get to know him. And he has a very, very good story to tell. And in our conversations, one of the things that he really wants to do is be involved in whatever community he's living in, to be part of a community outreach program to help misguided youth, as he was a misguided youth back in 1976. So I ask on behalf of his family that you give the highest level of consideration to releasing him and allowing him to come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Ms. Norris Henderson.
Good morning. Welcome. I've been knowing Jerry for 47 years. 27 of those years inside with him, and 20 years since I've been released. I've visited Jerry. I was still in Angola. 2 weeks ago at the police. I guess I'm the kind of proof in the pudding of who Jerry is. I've watched Jerry we actually created a hospital program together. The two of us, a few other guys. And one of the things we learned about hospital, and it wasn't job, wasn't something everybody did. When Jackson asked the question about what was his role, we had two teams of people. And some folks who did direct service, I mean, hands-on with patients, giving them bath, feeding them, whatever you took, and to folks who just done administrative. Talked about Point Lookout, Carrie was a part of our Wives Association also. And what that made me remember how we actually formed Barry. Barry, who came out, we had 9 guests that week. And during the process, home used to deliver calls. And there was one call from short. We had one guy who was actually in his box. And he literally fell out of the box. And at that point, Warden Kane suggested that we need to do something more dignified for abusers. And so through hospice and burial tools, started washing the bodies, dressing them, because we put in all the things, put in the body bags, and nothing. And so you have to have a certain temper to do that. And for Jerry to be still part of, but not just the last 6 months, but that road, still being a part of hospital. This is 24 years. Part of the front lookout group. Victim awareness at our early stage of incarceration, none of this stuff existed prior to 1990. We couldn't even go to school, let alone do anything else. But when I looked at the things, I was checking off all the questions that was like GED, that was something for something. But everything else that Jerry has done is for somebody else. Hospital, somebody else. The burial group, somebody else. Victim awareness by yourself, but more about how other people think and feel about his particular behavior. The human resources. Human resources, far from being the part in the role project, used to pay for the ads for those of life. And during this spell when nobody was getting point recommendations support, we morphed into human resources, human relations for us to kind of help the guys in the prison to sustain. Because by this time, a lot of folks didn't have loved ones still alive or still around. And so we provided care package for those that are sports. I coached football for 10 years, winningest coach in the history of years. And all that was more not us, but instill something to those younger guys who came out, to those young guys who, like Jared himself was. And one of the questions when the Jackson kept asking, why would you follow somebody who was 10 years old? And you know, the hard reality is that our ghetto heroes are not the role models that we do. And so sometimes we get caught up following people who we think is the role model that we see, as opposed to the role model like his cousin Kevin, who we didn't see when we were young. And so in this day and age, I think the opportunity now that Jerry's growing up, he's 47 years old, he's actually served half of the 99 years in the sense. So, and I would just actually really just consider that. I mean, we've seen Jerry, like this is his 5th time. And we're seeing, you know, he's going through this thing, but every time we've seen who advance himself, and if we look at the total prison population of this state, Jerry's in the facility now with 92 people. So that means he's one of the most trusted people in corrections in the state. And I think that has value added in this. Can never undo the harm. Can never do it. I know what that feels like. I lost a son, just lost a brother last July to violence. And I know what that feels like. One of the founding members of our organization had a heart attack 2 days ago. So I know what pain and hurt, all that looks. Sometimes you never get over. You know, my son's been dead 23 years. Some mornings I wake up and can't get out of bed. Something triggers something to make me think about it. Literally paralyzed. So I can understand what this family is going through and has been through. I would just ask that this is about mercy more than anything else. Forgiveness, people have a choice not to forgive anybody they want to do. But we just asking for mercy that this Lord hear our plea, that this family find their home to show Jerry mercy. You know, forgiveness, you know, you're not entitled to forgiveness. Mercy, we ask for mercy because we're always seeking mercy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. I'm gonna let the family decide who will speak first. Eugene? Okay. Just introduce yourself and state your what involvement you have with it.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Roach. My name is Gene Shaw. My mother was Beverly Shaw, Jerry's victim in the first bank robbery. Jerry and Preston, when they robbed the bank, they were sentenced to 99 years without probation and parole. And at the time, our families were told they're never going to get out, case closed, done deal. In past hearings, This is the first time I hear Jerry ever express any type of remorse. In past hearings, he's, put the blame on Preston, Preston was his influence, and it's not a 10-year difference. That's an exaggeration. It's a 7-year difference. So the exaggerations keep coming on in Jerry's story from here. He has petitioned that his sentence be reduced to 5 years. He has petitioned that I not be allowed to speak at hearings because I was a juvenile when my mother was shot. I mean, does that sound like a guy that is remorseful? No, I don't think so. You mentioned he had over 130 disciplinary write-ups. He's been a trustee. He's had that revoked. He sued the prison to get that back. So it's only recently that Jerry has seemed to be a good actor in prison. My family, the entire community of Parks, the sheriff, the mayor, my senator, my legislator, the chief of police, you've got all these letters, the people that know the details of this crime, think Jerry should stay right where he is, serve his sentence. When they robbed the bank, Jerry and Preston had gone to the bank in the morning. There was a crowd there, so they rode around Parks until the crowd left. And they went in the bank. My mother worked there alone. She had been in the bank about 8 years. And on that morning, she turned the cameras on before they walked to the door. Back then, you had to turn the cameras on, it wasn't automatic. But she had seen them during the day, early that morning, and she knew exactly what they were coming to do. So they went in the bank. Jerry's the one who, here's a picture of Jerry leaving the bank with the gun in his hand. Okay, Jerry was the actual shooter. I have a picture of Jerry standing over my mother's body in the tower. Jerry's a guy. Okay. Jerry is also the shooter in Rain. He denied that, but Jerry is also the shooter in Rain. When you read the statements from Jerry and Preston when they were arrested, there's only one thing that these two guys agreed upon, and those were my mother's last words. My mother's last words were, "Please don't shoot me. It's only money." She begged for her life. And he shot her anyway. He shot my mother here with that temple lobe. She was completely paralyzed. Stayed in a coma for 14 months. Never moved, never spoke. They told us she was deaf, she was blind, but her prefrontal lobe was still intact and she had brain activity. So my mother could still think. And can you imagine? Completely paralyzed. You can't communicate, you can't do anything, you can still think. That was a condition that my mother was in. We harp on, Jerry was being 17. Oh, okay, had Jerry stayed in school, he would have graduated high school 2 weeks before. Had he not gone to prison, he would have been able to vote that year. He'd have been able to serve his country, and it was, buy alcohol. This was not a kid. This is not some 13-year-old kid that, was influenced by someone who's a little bit older. Jerry, he was a man at the time. You can tell from the pictures. So, 2 weeks prior, when they killed Mr. Johnson, he went to rent a car, took that car, went to rob a bank. Bank was occupied, so they went to the hardware store and shot Mr. Johnson. They shot him the same way, execution style. Mr. Johnson was on the floor and shot him in the back. Okay. On July 1st, 1976, while he was in police custody, Jerry also confessed to the March 30th, 1976 robbery of the Hasty Morton Iberia and the murder of 62-year-old Louis Gladden. September 17th, Malcolm Roy also testified on oath that Jerry and Preston robbed the Hasty Morton, killed Mr. Gladden. Malcolm Roy confessed to have driven the getaway for him. Jerry personally led the investigators to the murder weapon of the Hasty Morton, and ballistics proved it was the same weapon used at the bank robbery and in Rain.
Mr. Shaw, you're over your time limit. I understand.
I thought I had 10 minutes, sir.
No, the family has 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, we read your letter. I read it twice, and I understand exactly what you're saying. Would you wrap it up?
I will wrap it up. We're here because of Morgan and Montgomery, okay? Morgan and Montgomery clearly states it's for first offense and for non-homicidal stuff. Jerry has already been given a break on the first sentence. Reduced to 50 years, made concurrent, that essentially wiped that sentence out and told these people that, you know, your grandfather's death is nothing. And when my mother died, and we talked about mercy, when my mother died, we were approached, did we want to go ahead and pursue murder conviction for Jerry because she hadn't died at the time of trial? And at that time, the death penalty was back in effect. So it was an option for us. But we said no. We said no. Let him live. It's in there for 198 years. We were merciful with Jerry then, and the court has been merciful with him on his first. He's had his mercy already. That's our position.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, and the next person. Please give us your name and your relationship to the case.
My name is Wilfred Johnson. And my grandfather was Curtis Johnson, which was murdered by Jerry.
Yes.
And I'm here to represent my grandfather, Curtis Johnson, who was robbed at gunpoint and murdered by Jerry Francis on May 10th. Today's May 9th. Tomorrow's the anniversary of his death by being shot. At Jerry's trial, Jerry Francis and Preston Dumanchet admitted prior to going into Hank's hardware store in rain, they planned to leave no witnesses. So they had in mind, nobody, whoever was there, they was gonna kill. Jerry Francis then went in the store, robbed my grandfather. He made my grandfather get on all fours, on his hands and knees. And then after they robbed him, they were leaving the store, and Preston Dumanchet said to Jerry, he said, "You forgot something." Jerry went back in the store and shot my grandfather in the back of the head and killed him. He died right away. And they killed my grandfather for $30. My grandfather never resisted or put up a fight. My grandfather was well known and liked in town. He was a very hard worker. All his life, he worked hard and minded his own business and took care of his family. And he didn't take anything from anybody. And then after they robbed Jerry, 2 weeks later, Jerry Francis and Preston Dumanchet went to the St. Martin Bank in Forest and robbed and shot Mrs. Beverly Shilton. So she was a bank teller. And then they were caught and convicted of armed robbery and murder. And they were each sentenced, this is what I don't understand, they were each sentenced to 2 counts, 99 years, no probation, no parole. And then now, every so many years, we gotta come back and fight for our grandparents and parents. So we're here again to relive the death of my grandfather. And because of the laws have changed, the murderers are now being given another chance for release. But what about my grandfather's rights and stuff? He didn't get a chance to come back. They took that away from him. They took it from him. And Miss Beverly. They didn't give her another chance on him. And so he's talking about a second chance, but my grandfather and Miss Beverly never had him. There'll be 47-year anniversary of my grandfather's murder. So that means that Jerry Francis will serve only 47 years for 2 armed robberies and 2 murders. So that's like half the sentence that he was sentenced for. Please consider that Jerry Francis was a cold-hearted murderer at 17 years old. His own mother knew how bad he was. He was the one who turned him in after seeing his picture on TV for the bank robbery. Despite the changes in laws, does it make it right to let a two count of armed robbery and murder out of prison early? His victim has no right to life. Please don't let anyone else be a victim of Jerry Francis. No one should have to go through what we still have to do. How could Jerry Francis possibly be a benefit to society? Especially today. My grandfather's legacy lives on through me and my children and grandchildren. If this man goes free, I and my family will lose faith in the legal system. We trusted the legal system this far. We hope our system doesn't fail us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And we have one more speaker. Your name and your relationship to the case.
Good morning, my name is Nicholas Shaw. I would have been Beverly Shaw's grandson, but honestly, I didn't get that chance that every year. It's the fifth time that my uncle's had to read it. It's very hard to watch. I almost feel that I was his age, and to hear him go through this 5-6 times over and over. Just here, less than a month ago, and I had to sit here and hear him relive that when he was a kid over and over and over. We're just asking that hopefully you keep him where he's supposed to be, because the last time Mr. Francis was out, he murdered 2 people behind the head. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Okay. Who would like to close it out for the victim? Okay, Ms. LeBeau?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
just give your full name and the organization you represent.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Joseph LeBeau, the Attorney General's Office, Louisiana Department of Justice. In 1976, Jerry Francis callously murders Beverly Shaw and Curtis Johnson. I think it's important that those names are spoken. And I find it ironic that Mr. Francis, who was given a half an hour to speak, never actually said their names, even though he claims to accept responsibility for his actions. He also never went over the specific acts that he committed after being asked by multiple members of his board. He failed to mention that he cased the bank, that they specifically targeted that were by themselves in a hardware store and at a bank, and that they specifically made Ms. Shaw and Mr. Johnson lie on the ground before he executed, for no other reason than to murder the only innocent witness to his crimes. Louisiana Department of Justice vehemently opposes the release of Mr. Francis for multiple reasons. This board should consider the horrific nature of the crime. I think that's been spoken about plenty today. I ask that you take that into consideration. More importantly, though, the fact that he has never actually truly shown remorse for his crimes. He didn't mention the names. He didn't talk about the facts. He has previously attempted to prevent the families from speaking at these hearings. That does not sound like somebody who truly feels sorry and accepts responsibility for his actions. He filed a motion to reduce the St. Martin Parish sentence to 0 to 5 years. Quite frankly, that's insulting to the family, and again, shows a complete lack of any true remorse. Finally, members of the board, I ask you to recognize the fact that Mr. Francis has already been granted multiple forms of relief. But for the fact that the first-degree murder statute was found unconstitutional right at the time that he committed these crimes, he would likely be either on death row or serving a life without sentence. After that, in 2016, he was resentenced to 50 years on one of the armed robbery counts, another form. And finally, he has been given the opportunity to earn good time. I believe he has a good time date of 2029. That is the third form of relief that he has been offered. I ask that you require him to serve out that good time. He continues to not get in trouble in prison. As for the good time, I believe Judge Jackson specifically asked him about an incident in 2012. Mr. Francis stated that was because he didn't check out. Well, according to the DPS records on September 12, 2012, he was actually convicted of threatening behavior. This is yet another example of failure to take responsibility for his actions. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, again, we ask that you recognize the relief already received by Mr. Francis, weigh that against the immeasurable loss of the Parks and Rain communities as well as the victims and their families. We ask that you deny his application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau. Okay, the DA from the 16th JDC.
Yes, sir. My name is Claire Howington and I'm from the 16th DA's office. I've actually been acquainted with this case since 2016 when I started working at the DA's office. And one of the things that always strikes me about Mr. Francis's case is when people in the community, the parks, learn that this case is still ongoing, the thing that they always tell me is that was the day that parks started locking stores. That this was the crime that changed the character of that community so deeply that they all became. And I think that that's something that this board really needs to consider. When I know you've heard so much about the facts of this case, but I want to talk about how it's really affected everyone in the community, as well as the family members. The last time I was here, Mr. Show brought this up briefly. This is the 5th time that Mr. Francis has been here for parole. And I remember at the last time that specifically he showed no remorse. He made no contrition. And this is the first time that I have ever heard him say anything that sounds like contrition to me. You know, and one of the things that really strikes me about that is that you have heard so much about the compassion that he has showed to his fellow inmates, but there's been no compassion of his crimes. There's been no compassion for what that effect has had on the community. And you don't know what's in someone's heart, but I do find that that is, it's been 46 years and he's just getting around to that now. Again, this is something where 2 people were killed and in a very, very deliberate and horrible way. He has only served 46 years for 2 lives. He does have a good time date. Again, as my colleague said, he has received multiple forms of relief, and we would really strongly ask that you make him serve out the rest of that time.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Mr. Francis,
Yes, sir.
you'd like to make a brief closing statement.
Yes, sir. Well, they said that I didn't mention the name of Ms. Beverly Shaw and Mr. Johnson. And I understand they hurt. I mean, I truly do. I get it.
Mr. Francis, don't address the statements. Address why you think we should parole you.
Well, sir, I think that my record is going to speak for itself. I think that after y'all carefully observe the record, and I hope that y'all see that I deserve the opportunity. You know, not me saying I deserve. Just look at my records and see whether I deserve that opportunity or not. And that's all I'm asking for from y'all. And I'll understand one way or the other.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Mrs. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. There is no question that what Mr. Francis did 46 years ago was heinous and atrocious. There's absolutely no question about that. But the inquiry doesn't stop there. Mr. Francis was 17 years old. And so what the Supreme Court says is that condemning Mr. Francis to a lifetime of incarceration is unconstitutional only if his crime was the mark of someone who's permanently incorrigible and capable of rehabilitation. Evaluating Mr. Francis's record, not just what happened for what he did, what he caused 46 years ago, evaluating the entirety of his record, there is clear demonstrated maturity and rehabilitation. over the last 46 years. You've heard exhaustively about Mr. Francis being a founding member of the hospice organization. Lookout, he took every available class good, earned his GED in 1997 before he had any hope of release while he was serving a 198-year sentence. He made the effort to improve himself, to help people. There was a write-up in 2012, which was discussed at his last hearing, which was at Angola. And I think with the warning there explained what the 2012 write-up was, and I think the prior panel recognized that it was a low-level offense. But his write-up before that was in 2004. Last write-up before 2012 was in 2004. So in 19 years, Mr. Francis had one disciplinary write-up. He's been a Class A trustee for 20 years, and there is objective evidence that Mr. Francis poses no threat to society. There's the Tiger Risk Assessment, which designates him as low. And also, if the board looks at his prior jobs, he worked on the B-line around children and women at Angola. He worked in the hospital around nurses at Angola. He worked on death row as a death row orderly around other people. Mr. Francis is, and now he's at the state police barracks where he interacts daily with members of law enforcement, the public, and everybody has always received glowing recommendations and letters of support. This is the true testament to his character. This is rehabilitation that is measurable objectively. It's not Mr. Francis attempting to put on a show. This is, he turned a corner and he never looked back. If he is granted release, he's not returning to the community that he devastated. He is going to Baton Rouge. He will then transition to New Orleans. There is support for him in the area. And I would also, there was mention about Mr. Francis's good time date, which is 6 years, he would be 72 years old. What the Supreme Court says is that the opportunity for release must be meaningful and it must be based on rehabilitation and maturity. So the good time date is an operation of law. It's not based on what he did or did not do within prison. What the meaningful opportunity for release is today is these parole hearings. I would further note that Preston Dumonche remains in prison. The same considerations of the mitigating factors of youth and Board Directive 334 would not apply in any parole hearing that Preston Dumonche ever has before this board. And so given all of that, and given, as Barry Myers pointed out, his repeated denials of parole, he's never lost hope. He's never discouraged. He's continued to find other ways to better himself. He's now at the barracks. He's taken since the last hearing 2 years ago. He got recertified as in CPR. He took additional programs for skilled nursing and end-of-life nursing. He's taken self-help programs while at the state police barracks. And Mr. Francis will continue to do this because this is who he is. And so based on his rehabilitation maturity, based on who he is today, we've asked for to grant Mr. Francis release in any conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Is the panel ready to vote?
Mr. Rocha, I'd like to move for executive session.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the meal parole goes into executive session to discuss confidential matters. If you call the roll, sir.
Calvin Roche,
Yes.
Bonnie J.
Yes.
Yes.
The committee on parole will stand adjourned. We're going into executive session and we will return momentarily. 9 a.m. Is the panel ready to vote?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
I just want to say this before I give my decision and the reasons for my decision. First off, I will say this is the hardest case I've ever had to settle. We have 2 victims, both ended up deceased. We have a man that's done what he's supposed to do in prison. But there's also the punitive end of things. And like I said, there's 2 deceased victims. And you ought to be able to compare this a lot, Mr. Francis, because you did work in hospice. I mean, this young man right here Mr. Shope had to sit there like he worked in hospice with his mother for 16 months until she passed away. I cannot even fathom, would not, fathom. And you do have a good time day. So my vote today is going to be to deny and
Please, no reactions. This is the court. We're not judges.
vote to deny. Okay.
Mrs. Jackson.
All right, Mr. Francis, you have done some good work. You have been incarcerated for 47 years. But when I look at the circumstances of the offense and the fact that 2 people were killed, I also look at the fact that you do have a date. You are going to be released from prison in 2029, regardless of what this board does today. And because of the strong opposition from the victims' families, the district attorney, the attorney general's office, all law enforcement entities in the affected parishes, and the impact of the crime on those communities, my vote likewise would be to deny.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Francis. Today, I am the longest sitting board member on this panel. If I'm not correct, this is the 3rd time that I'm sitting on a panel and you have made a request for an early release. Today I've seen the vast difference between hearing number 3 and number 4. I think I said on hearing number 3 and hearing number 4. And I denied you both times because I didn't see the rehabilitation and the maturity that I was looking for. You were 17 years old at the time you committed this crime. By all standards, the Supreme Court of the United States considers you a juvenile life. In that court, in the Supreme Court of Louisiana, has mandated as one of my responsibilities when it comes to juvenile lifers, I must look for a level of rehabilitation, which I see today, and a level of maturity, which I surely see today. And one of the, and I don't remember which, a federal lower court said that I cannot use opposition as a sole reason for denying a juvenile life based on a level of maturity and rehabilitation that I see today. My vote is to grant your request for an early release. We have received 2 votes to deny your request, 1 vote to grant your request. Based on that vote, your request for early release has been denied. You have a good day.